Alright, so today we're going to be focusing on finally a bad movie on this channel. I feel like I've only sucked movies' dick so far, so it's important to talk about the bad ones, the ones that we don't enjoy. This was kind of a random film. I don't think this film has really any attention or cult following, maybe. Maybe it could, I don't know. But I'm going to be talking about 1986's Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. This film came out in, of course, 1986. It is an independent movie, which you do got to give it some props for that it's doing this out of its own self. It doesn't need anything to buy it or support it. So I think that is always impressive whenever a feature length or an independent film gets made. That's always something to praise. And I'm trying to go to the positives here first. This film stars Michael Rooker, who you might know from the Marvel movies, or from what I know him from is Mallrats. He's excellent in Mallrats. Unknown actors Tom Knowles and Tracy Arnold. No idea who they are. I learned about the existence of this film from a podcast I listened to. I don't know if anyone is familiar with TSD or Tell 'em Steve Dave. I'm a big fan of that show. I've only started listening to it for a year. So I'm going through the backlog, and they've kind of mentioned this film, but kind of in an interesting way. So essentially, one of the hosts on the show is really enjoys this film. This is a film that he highly praises, which I'm kind of shocked about now after watching it. But this is a film that he said he actually ran into the writer of this film. There's two writers on this film. One is the director and one is Richard Fire. And essentially, I don't want to disparage this man, but he said at a local grocery store he actually ran into him and was super floored and shocked that someone who was this talented to write a movie like this would end up working in a grocery store. Nothing against that. We need grocery store workers, but I think that'd be definitely disappointing if you're an aspiring artist and now you're stuck working as a cashier. But enough of that, enough of my background with this movie. Let's just get into it. So essentially, for me, this film, I went to this film blind. I think it is important to go into film blind and to not watch it. I don't really like watching trailers. I just don't like to, because I'm going to watch a trailer, I'm going to watch it that day. And I'm like, I've already seen this scene. I've seen it in the trailer. It's like, I just don't want that spoiler. I know it could be little, might not be very important. I just enjoy seeing a film blind that you know nothing about, barely anything off the title. And that's kind of how I went into it. Thankfully, I did not have to pay for this film. I was able to find it on Plex, their own streaming service thing. It's basically the same as Tubi. And I want to make a video on my thoughts on streaming services. Overall, I really don't like streaming services, but I'm not as completely against those streaming services because they're kind of trying to provide content which you don't have to pay for, and it makes more sense of a model. It's just basically like if you're gonna watch a movie on there, it's like watching a movie on TV back in the day. You just have to deal with commercials periodically, maybe every 20 to 30 minutes. I was really going on what I was expecting, and I think for me, when I look at the true crime genre, or you look at America's fascination with serial killers, North America's fascination, kind of worldwide fascination with serial killers and crazy violence and all those kind of weird things. We're as humans, I find we're instantly drawn to it and fascinated by it, which is definitely strange. And now in popular culture, it's like a normal thing to be like, I'm super into serial killers, even though I don't know, probably 70 years ago or 60 years ago would be thought you were a serial killer, but now it's like simply normal to go through normal conversation with your coworkers about some of the most heinous crimes ever committed. And I do find it weird. I'm not going to pretend I don't partake in it and I'm too good for talking about these kind of things. But what actually is happening is it's kind of an exploitation of the victims of these murders. Especially, this film is not based off a true story, but there's a lot of exploitation that happens in a lot of these stuff with books, and I've even seen some sickening merchandise that people have tried to make a buck off of using serial killers, which I think is genuinely terrible. Maybe if you're doing that to raise money for the victims, even though these people don't deserve to have their face on a shirt. I understand there's iconic ones and crazy ones that people have kind of fell into pop culture. You think of the 60s, you think of Charles Manson, right? So it's just, I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't exist, but I do frankly find it a weird thing that society does. But this film isn't technically based off any real serial killer. It's kind of a fictionalized, but it will borrow some stuff from famous killers, Ed Gein and all those kind of people. But really, where for me this film really falls apart is just kind of where there's seemingly nothing to gauge you with this. What I was really expecting was going to be a lot more of a character study, maybe more of a psychological study, and it kind of has that, but nothing interesting at all. It's nothing that you have not seen before. It's nothing surface level. I really was expecting this film was going to be about Michael Rooker, who was this weird, crazy serial killer. Because at the start of the movie, it starts off with these. And first, there's so much shit to talk about. But first, when it starts off, it like shows basically these crime scenes of what looks like dead hookers. But there's nothing that indicates of who did it or how it's done. And you kind of gauge from some clues early on that it was probably Henry who did these things. But also Henry has this roommate who's Otis. He's basically fucked up teeth. That's how I remember him. And a weird mustache. And his sister, who just got out of a very abusive relationship, who used to be a sex worker and things like that, she's moving back in the house for the time being. She has like a daughter, and she's just trying to get her shit together. Their energy between the brother and sister is really fucking weird and Alabama-y. And Henry is just there, like he's just a roommate that he's like kind of cool with. And the first thing too, I think what this film definitely needed was a friendship or a good charisma or a good back and forth between the two leads in this film with Otis and Henry, because they really were nothing, like it just seemed so stale. They seemed to barely know each other. It seemed like was like a convenience that it was cheaper rent if they shared it here. Did not seem at all like they're going to be friends. And then all of a sudden, this film just basically turns into them being like, yeah, we'll commit murder. We'll just commit murder when we want. And also, too, another issue with it is just because it's a very raw film. It's going for a very realism, almost Taxi Driver-esque, very raw, uncomfortableness to it. It looks 70s with its grain and grossness. It's not a very aesthetically pleasing film, but it seemingly has no logic. All these people, they've killed people in basically public places with guns, with basically just dumping people in the back alley and being like, man, they'll never find it. And maybe they're not. I don't really see cops as very confident people. But genuinely, I'm like, where the hell? Like, there's no way, even at the worst incompetent cops, you see a dead body in the middle of a street, there's going to be an investigation on it. And these shady-ass fuckers seem like they would not be smart enough to cover their tracks up. And they don't even show anything that cover them tracks. It feels like at times this is kind of almost like American Psycho at points, but definitely not as good, definitely not as well written or directed. Kind of feel confused, and from what I really thought was like, that just seems like pure exploitation. There's no reasoning. There's nothing to get understanding behind these two characters and why they're doing this. It just seemingly seems like a hobby they just started picking up, which is raping women and killing them. Like, that seems like a pretty fucked up hobby just to do with your friends. I feel like you need something to not say understand that, but to maybe get a reasoning behind that starting. It just seemed like all of a sudden these two guys are just willingly just committing the worst heinous crimes that they want to. I need to talk about the music. The music sucks. The music is awful in this movie. I know it's a cheap movie. I don't want to be too harsh. It is a smaller movie. This is not a Marvel. It's not a big Hollywood studio production. So I do feel worse when I'm shitting on that. But at the same time, there's a lot more you could do. It just seemed like the same cheap old trick. Show like really slow camera zooms or show these really slow things with just this really uncanny, uncomfortable music behind it. It kind of reminded me of the kid with the foot fetish and polyester when that music behind it. But that movie used it as a purpose. This movie just is like purposely trying to get you uncomfortable, but not in a unique or real way. Like, it just nails down the chalkboard in music. Whoa! And then when it gets close to the end, there is also a very strange scene where Otis gets really loaded one night, and then Henry and his sister are gonna, make out, do the whole thing, and he catches him, and they weren't expecting him to catch him. But what ends up happening is Henry flees out of kind of more embarrassment and being like, I should get the hell out of here before he kills me for fucking his sister. And then you come back, and then he is fucking his own sister. Otis is fucking his own sister, and that's where Henry kills him and takes him out. There is like one good gore scene where he puts the back of like a hair comb into his eye, and I was like, oh shit! Even though it was like really fake, and you could see the dummy 1 second before it was shot, it was still like a good like, whoa! This film was doing something. But then again, nothing happens throughout this. Then all of a sudden, Henry and his sister are like, okay, we got to get out of here. We got to move on to spots. So they're finally like, okay, there is police in this universe. Seemingly feels like they didn't exist. And then next, there's just a scene where they go to a seedy motel. And in the next scene is you just see Henry not walk out with her and then throw a bag of her body out into the highway. And that's the movie. That's all it has to say. It has nothing interesting to commentate or to go about when it comes to serial killers or serial killer culture in America. It's absolutely nothing to say about it. To me, this is a glorified 80s slasher. It has a lot of tits for no reasoning. It has a lot of gore and killing of women for absolutely no reasoning. So I don't know. To me, this film just did really not sit well for me. I just did not enjoy it. I was really hoping to. Like, when I heard about it, when they were talking about it on the podcast, I was like, okay. I was surprised. I usually like their taste, so I'm like, okay, let's get into it. Let's see it. This was awful. This is not even worth watching. Not even really worth supporting, in my opinion. I don't know who is. It's on Plex for free. But yeah, if you're really interested in seeing it, it's only 80 minutes long, so it's not going to take up so much of your time that it's annoying, which is probably two good things I'll give to it. That kill with the eye, and that it's only 80 minutes long, so it's not going to take your weekend to watch this film. But yeah, overall, I'm not going to give this very much praise. I'm going to give this a 1.5 out of 10. I did not like this film. Not for me. Tell me what you think about it down below. Thank you so much for watching.